First You Think is a not-for-profit ministry of the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Support us at ucdsm.org today.
Teach us how to sing like you. Alyssa blurted it out, but we were all thinking it. Years ago, I had the honor of being part of a workshop where on this side of the stage sat the liberal arts college choir that I directed, predominantly white, and on this side of the stage sat the Harlem Gospel Choir, 9 professional African-American singers who the night before had blown the metaphorical roof off of our concert venue. And so my students, knowing that we were coming into a workshop the next day with that choir, you can understand Alyssa's excitement. Teach us how to sing like you! They were looking for tips and tricks for how to sing authentically in the Black gospel tradition. The lead educator for the ensemble paused for a minute and then responded. Okay, so the first thing is that all of us have master's degrees in vocal performance from major conservatories of music. That's the right answer. Yeah. Second, we've all been singing this repertoire our whole lives. We grew up with this music. But you know the most important thing? The most important thing is that we believe in our bones what we're singing. We give thanks to God for the blessing of praising his holy name with our voices. The first 2 of those responses made sense to my students. If you want to be excellent at something, you need an advanced degree from an expert. And we all know that study about 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. That's probably how that got there. But believing something in your bones, that's not really what we do here in this liberal arts college. That comment changed the energy of the workshop, and it's been changing me since. Do you know in your bones that something you're saying is real and true? Last week we gathered and we talked about what is the purpose of a Unitarian Universalist church. We resolved that the mission that we currently have, right? To love radically, to grow ethically and spiritually, and to serve justly. That's a good answer. But today I want to ask, to what end? Where are we going with that? What is the vision that we are trying to co-create through that work? The question is, what is your vision for the future? I know there is no one single answer among any group of Unitarians, but I think that the most popular answer is probably the beloved community. We are working to co-create the beloved community. This is a term that's originally attributed to the philosopher Josiah Royce. But we know this term, beloved community, through the work of the Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman and his student, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So let's make sure we understand what we're talking about with this term. Beloved community, for Dr. King, never meant some sort of imaginary utopia where wolves and lambs dwell together, where we hand one another a Coca-Cola and sing in perfect harmony. If you're not old enough to get that, look it up on YouTube. That would be emotional bosh, as he might put it. Beloved community, to quote the King Center, is a realistic, achievable goal that could be attained by a critical mass of people committed to and trained in the philosophy and methods of nonviolence. So I think when we use that word, we want to be clear about it. Realistic and achievable, a critical mass, not 7.5 billion people, a critical mass of people, and committed to and trained in the philosophy and methods of nonviolence. The Reverend Dr. King was no fool. He did not imagine for a second that we would stop having conflicts with one another. There is always conflict when there are two people. only that we would commit to nonviolent, determined mutual commitments to working our problems out. As he put it in 1967, I have decided to stick with love, for I know that love is ultimately the only answer to humanity's problems. You have to imagine he considered all the other options. I've decided to stick with love. As we might say in Unitarian Universalism, we covenant to put love at the center. In the abstract, that sounds good. I agree with that. But then I remember that in 1967, just like every other year in his life, the Reverend Dr. King was being terrorized, threatened with his life, his family's lives threatened. The amount of injustice that he had to face on any given day, I can't begin to wrap my head around. And so I ask myself, how could you decide to stick with love through so much terror? And he answers this elsewhere, right? He says that he was committed to agape love. That's a Greek word, agape. And he defines that as the love of God operating in the human heart. And I point this out because it's sometimes easy to forget that the Reverend Dr. King was a reverend. He was an ordained Baptist minister, which is to say that he drew strength from knowing in his bones that the God that he worshiped desires the justice and flourishing for all, that was part of his God's plan. And that presents a special challenge for us in our pluralistic, non-creedal denomination, because we don't have such a statement of belief. We don't claim ever to know with every fiber of our being that God desires ever-flowing streams of justice. Do you hear that difference? Do you feel that difference? It reminds me of that lead educator saying the most important thing is that we actually believe what we're singing. Lord, is it you? I'll go into Samuel. In our great tent of Unitarian Universalism, questioning and seeking is warmly welcome. That is how I found my denomination, my people. I am deeply grateful for it. I love the questions more than the answers, and I hope to continue to grow in wonder and curiosity for just as long as I have breath. But I recognize that without knowing in one's bones that the beloved community is actually true and possible, then it gets hard to stay the course in the storm. It gets hard to stay focused when the work becomes difficult or unpopular or flat out dangerous. And so I think we try, in the right spirit, to articulate a clearer version of beloved community. And I think that sometimes leads us astray. When people articulate their hoped-for future, it's easy to slip into a list of things you want to see in that beloved future. I want to see nuclear disarmament. But that's not the term that Dr. King uses when he refers to beloved community. He's talking about a process, a way of being with one another. He's not talking about bespoke lists. One of the problems when you make your bespoke list of your beloved future is that your list and my list do not look the same. You, for example, want to see more cats in that blessed future, and I'm allergic to cats. It goes, I had a lot of other ones there, and we had to cut it for space. I'm pointing at a bigger problem here. When you make the list of what you want to see in that blessed day, who is included in your vision for the future? And who is excluded from your vision of the future? All 7.5 billion of us, who is included in your vision for the future, and who's excluded? On any given day, half of the population disagrees with you on one or more important issues. Are you imagining that they wake up that day, as I often have, and say, you know what, Steve? I just realized you're right. I've been wrong this whole time. Or are you imagining that some sort of biblical flood/Passover takes away everyone who disagrees with you? Where do they go? It's more articulately stated by the activist and writer Adrienne Marie Brown. She says, when we imagine the world we want to shift towards, are we dreaming of being the winners of the future? Or are we dreaming of a world where winning is no longer necessary because there are no enemies? Can I say that again? When we imagine the world we want to shift towards, are we dreaming of being the winners of the future? Or are we dreaming of a world where winning is no longer necessary because there are no enemies? A world without enemies is a strong vision. But it's awfully hard to imagine that when it feels like we are metaphorically at one another's throats. How can we imagine that kind of future if the injustices that Dr. King was preaching about in 1967 are growing worse today? Living in a world with the twin evils of violence and injustice, it's hard to stay that course for that nonviolent cooperative work. Do not misread me for Pollyanna. Do not think that as I speak to you today that I'm suggesting that if we all just hug it out, we'll never have conflict, that I never get mad. To be awake in the world is to get mad at things. I have a long list of things that I get mad at. That's another sermon. But let me explain how easy it is to feel the sense of winner, loser, good, bad, me, other. The day I finished writing the first version of this sermon, I had to go out and get the groceries. And that grocery store conquered my love for all humanity. Because I left feeling like everything is possible. I have this bone-deep hope for the world. And by the time I got to the cereal aisle, and I wish I was making this up, here comes this guy parking his cart perpendicular in the aisle. Traffic backing up in both, and he's pondering, like for the first time in his life, the difference between Fruit Loops and Fruity O's. And so I'm like 4 carts back, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe we're wrong about universal salvation, because I think this man's going to hell. I'm not a Pollyanna. We get mad. The question is not, do we stop getting mad? Do we have to have ever-present love? To be awake in the world is to be mad. That's not the point. The point is that I'm trying to unlearn, I need to unlearn this kind of me versus the other. I'm trying to unlearn a world of winners and losers. I alluded to the problem. Let me state it. I don't have the Reverend Dr. King's particular faith to root me in the storm. I envy that. But I have to find my own way to stay rooted because I know it's possible. So I do the loving kindness meditation that we all did this morning. And I'm hoping to arrive at a deep compassion. And a compassion is not the same thing as letting everyone do whatever they want. It's seeing the complexity and the wholeness of one another. So I take time to consider who I am most mad at that morning, and it's usually pretty easy to figure out. And I really want to arrive at holding this person in compassion and radical love. Sometimes I'll settle for curiosity, if that can move me out of anger, but I never want that pedantic, oh, that poor stupid person. That's not compassion. Sometimes it helps me to remember that every fist swinging toward my face was once an open palm. Because my love for all beings is very much a work in progress, but I have come to understand something profound. We can believe in something at a bone-deep level, whether we center it the way Dr. King did in his divinity of God, or we center it in another spiritual practice like loving kindness, or we center it in the capacity for humanity itself. We can water the garden one day at a time, though there's nothing green in the city, knowing that it will eventually be verdant. First Unitarian, I'm trying to say this. I believe in my bones that the beloved community is possible, that a critical mass of people dedicated to working through conflicts as they always arise is actually possible. I believe it. Not tips and tricks, not dabbling. In my bones, I now know that it is possible. And I hear what that sounds like as one who wants empirical evidence. As a fellow pragmatist, I hear what that sounds like. It sounds unrealistic. It sounds foolish. It sounds like a dream. Because nonviolent cooperation is not how the world is currently operating. You don't need a list, but millions of people are denying your identity or claiming ownership of your reproductive choices or censoring the ability to wonder aloud if the nation has unresolved issues with racism. If we're lacking the imagination of that peaceable future, it's because the empirical evidence in this moment is overwhelming us right now. But that's not the evidence I'm talking about. I'm talking about being a student of history. Joanna Macy and Chris Johnstone preach about this in the book Active Hope. Let me try and articulate it. In the 1700s, there were abolitionists. And they said, we understand the economies of the colonies in Europe hinge on enslaving people. But we are absolutely sure there is a better way. And what were they called? Unrealistic and foolish and dreamers until they weren't. And in the 1800s, there were people fighting for women to have the basic right to vote. And what were they? They were unrealistic and foolish and dreamers until they weren't. And Dr. King, working in the civil rights movement in the 50s, was called unrealistic and foolish and famously a dream. Until it wasn't, right? I mean, sometimes we're trying to forget things that were so recent. Children with physical or cognitive differences weren't allowed to go to public school 60 years ago. That was considered unrealistic and foolish and a dream until it wasn't. If you could sit down with your great-grandparents today and explain to them that there are more women in med school or law school than men, they would stop at, wait, women get bank accounts? History teaches us it's always unrealistic and foolish and a dream until it isn't. I mean, sometimes in America, we're trying to imagine an unrealistic dream that's already happening elsewhere. We can't consider any possible way to handle crime other than to imprison millions of citizens and at wildly disproportionate rates. But other countries have already seemed to have found a way. It always seems unrealistic and foolish and a dream until the critical mass makes it so. So you look at your hands and you realize that we've been taught over and over to ball them into fists and to fight, to defeat the opposition, the us versus them. And I look at my fists and I realize that if I open my palms to radical love, I risk a lot. And what I risk is so much less than what people whose identities have been marginalized risk. But anyone who opens their palms to love, well, you risk being a chump, right? You risk getting hurt, and you also risk letting go of your sense of righteousness and control. But I do know this. Those students did not learn how to sing like the Harlem Gospel Choir from tips and tricks. If we want to live in the beloved community with less injustice and violence, we have to know in our bones that it is possible to co-create a world, a critical mass of people committed to justice and peace. I know that I will never flourish in this life, never play my part in leaving the world a little more compassionate when my time ends if we keep our fists balled up. And I'm certain that we will not arrive at that peaceful, just, and equitable, loving world until one by one, and then in community, we support one another in taking that risk, dismantling the unjust systems, and opening our palms to one another. And so I come back to Dr. King. I've decided to stick with love, for I know that love is ultimately the only answer to mankind's problems. Do you believe that? Do you believe that in your bones? I invite you to join me in that work. Let us let go of our bespoke visions of the future. Let us courageously orient what we do toward this process of open-palmed justice seeking. And let us do all things rooted in the compassionate love for the interdependence of all beings. And I should warn you, people will see us out there doing that work, and they will call us unrealistic and foolish, a dream, until it isn't. May it be so. You give me a